there. It's never done this before. This is a completely.
Friends, we gather in sorrow. We gather with a deep sense of loss. And we also gather with deep admiration, with love and tenderness and light. We gather with respect, kavod, and gratitude and appreciation for the life and for the presence of Fred Levine in our lives. We heard our trumpeter play St. James Infirmary, one of Fred's 2 favorite songs, to play on his trumpet. A quote from the song made famous by Louis Armstrong: "When I die, I want you to dress me in straight-laced shoes, box-back coat and a Stetson hat, put a $20 gold piece on my watch chain, so the boys will know that I died standing pat." The beautiful prayer Adon Olam begins with descriptions of God that are expansive and transcendent and far away. We say, Adon Olam, master of the universe, you are beyond time and space. But the Adon Olam ends with descriptions of God that are tender and imminent and close and near. These are the descriptions that bring us comfort and connection in times like these. Biado afkid ruchi be'eti shan be'ayira. Into your hands, God, I place my spirit when I sleep and when I rise. Ve'im ruchi geviati Adonai li v'lo ira. And with my body and my soul, God is with me, so I don't need to be afraid. We seek consolation, we seek comfort. We look to our tradition for solace with Psalm 23, our psalm of comfort.
Adonai roi lo echzar binot deshe yarbitzeini al mei menuchot al mei menuchot yenaleini nafshi yeshovev yeshovev yancheini b'maglei tzedek yancheini b'maglei tzedek leman shemo gam ki heilech begeit al machaveit lo yira ki ata yemadi shiftecha hom yishantecha heima yenachamoni Haroch lefanai, lefanai, shulchan neged sorerai, dishanta vashem roshi, kosi erevaya. Wachtov vachesed yirdefuni, kol yemei chayai, kol yemei chayai, v'shavti beveit Adonai leyom Adonai roi lo echsar. Adonai roi lo echsar.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. God helps me lie down in green pastures and leads me beside the still waters. God restores my soul and guides me in straight paths for God's name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. I shall dwell in the house of Adonai forever. Our deepest condolences go out to Fred's family, to Velva, the love of his life, a true partner in every way. To Fred's children, Bob and Julie and Dana, we are so sorry for your loss. To Fred's grandchildren, Stephanie, Andrew, Ahava, and Solomon. To his nieces and nephews and all his relatives and friends and colleagues who are like family, our hearts break for you all. When a loved one passes, we recount their deeds and we speak of their character. We'll begin with Fred's children, Julie and Dana and Bob. Julie?
Dad's parties. Every 10 years, Mom threw Dad a big birthday party. What I've come to appreciate is that it was never about the what or the where. It was about the love and warmth of lifelong friends and their gift of making new friends into lifelong friends. So much so that on Dad's 90th birthday, he saw how happy his friends were to reconnect and be together again for a happy occasion that he did not read his speech. So I will share his speech with you now. Welcome, everyone. We were afraid all week that we might have to cancel because of the COVID, but thank God we are here together. It means a lot to me to have my nearest and dearest share this momentous occasion with me, and I thank you for coming. Thought I'd share some of my life story with you. After all, when does one ever have a captive audience? I was born in Kansas City, Missouri, to Katie Bennett and Phil Levine. My parents divorced a year later, so my mother and I moved to Wichita, Kansas, to live with her mother and daddy, Bubby and Granddaddy. My grandparents, Eva and Philip Litwin, came to the States from Minsk and Lithuania. Their first child was born on the ship coming to the States. They named him Harry. They moved to Wichita because Harry became president of Koch Engineering. We lived in a small two-bedroom home, which meant that I grew up sleeping in the room with my mother until I went away to college. Can you imagine? As was the custom in those days, families stayed close together, so Mother's sister, Esther, her husband Morris, and my cousin Herb lived down the street from us. In those marriages, sisters married twin brothers. Very cozy. As far as Bubby was concerned, Harry was the king in her home, and I guess I came in second, because every night the three of us had dinner together. Harry at one end of the table and me at the other. The others ate in the kitchen. Harry discussed all of his problems of the day with his mother, and she directed him many, many times. She even told us when it was the right time for me to replace Harry at the company. Think she was the boss? Before I went to junior high and high school, I told my mother I wanted to play a musical instrument. She asked which one. I said clarinet. She heard coronet and brought home a trumpet, which I have played ever since. And in addition to playing in the East High School band, I began playing tennis on the team and ended up as the number 2 man. I attended the University of Oklahoma, where I entered the geological engineering school and have worked in that sector ever since. But before we get into that, I want to tell you I pledged a fraternity that happened to be started years before by Velva's uncles. Velva came to school 2 years later, and I saw her at different parties. When I went home for Thanksgiving break, I told my mother I had met the girl I was going to marry. We had our first date on New Year's Eve of that year, and here we are 67 years later. I was in ROTC in the university, so after graduation and our marriage, Velva and I went to St. Louis, where I served in the Air Force for 2 years. As an aside, Velva worked at the field as a secretary for the head of camp and had a higher security clearance than I did. Can you imagine? I've always worked. From the time I was 13, I sold shoes at Baker's Shoe Store on Saturdays, and when I went to college, I did the same, plus play in a jazz band on Saturday nights to make extra spending money. And I continued the Saturday job selling shoes at Chandler's while we were in the Air Force. After I was discharged, we went back to Wichita, where my real career started. I worked for Koch Engineering as a fractionating tower inspector. 2 of the refineries I worked in were in Minnesota, were owned by Koch. I was good at my job, but I don't think it hurt that I was Charles Koch's weekly tennis partner. This profession allowed me to work in many different countries, 19 countries, and my favorite, Israel. I was president of Litwin Corp after Harry retired and worked in conjunction with our dear friend Harvey Katz, who was president of the Paris office. We sold Litwin a few years later, and I was fortunate enough to have met Bob McNair through the Young Presidents Organization. He was organizing a company to build cogeneration plants. He asked me to work with him, and I was happy to become vice chairman of Cogen Technologies. We had many successes together. He was a terrific guy, and we respected him a lot. By now, on the family front, Velva and I had 2 wonderful children, first Bob and then Dana. Bob and his wonderful wife, Julie, are here with their daughter, Stephanie, who you might recognize as your photographer tonight. Both she and her brother, Andy, are great photographers and artists. Our daughter, Dana, and her children, Solomon and Ahava, are out of town currently and were unable to join us. We are so very proud of our children and the fact that besides being successful in their fields, they also are very charitable to the causes they hold dear. I hope I haven't bored you to death and that you are ready for some good music from the Music Box Theater stars. I love you all. Thank you for celebrating with me. And if I can add my 2 cents, here's to a life well lived.
Hi, old friends, friends of mom and dad, and friends in God. Thank you for being here and for being good to my parents, and continue to be good to my mom, please. I haven't seen a lot of many of you who I know in the last decade. I've been kind of tied up defending a lawsuit from my former husband, and he wouldn't let me go. So I'm delighted to be here and honor my dad and mom and family. I admired my dad, his impact on the world in the energy field, tennis, kindness, and his dad to me. Dad was respectful, sweet, appropriately tough, and had a great sense of humor at every unexpected place in town. I love you, Dad, and will miss you. While I think perhaps un-Jewish, Dad, I'll see you on the other side, and when I do, I'll loudly call your name. Rest in peace, my darling Dad.
My dad was truly one of a kind, an accomplished businessman, philanthropist, musician, and athlete, as many or most of you already know. I've watched him my entire life and observed lots of traits that helped him become that person. I'd like to share some of them with you. First and foremost, he loved his family, all of it, and did lots of things to show it. As Julie noted, he was raised as part of two families, all of the progeny of his Bubby and Granddaddy, and he stayed in touch with all of those people all of their lives. Besides his mother and Uncle Harry, he visited and supported his Aunt Esther and Uncle Morris and his cousins Herb and Darlene by visiting in person, as well as calling them regularly, even when they were failing health-wise, as well as when they were healthy. He loved them all, and they loved him back. As a businessman, he was a far cry from the ruthless, money-hungry caricature we see regularly in TV and film. Instead, he was a smart, capable, and driven person who also was a fun, thoughtful, likable guy that people wanted to do business with. This approach, and it really wasn't a strategy, it was just who he was, worked for him throughout his career, whether with Royal Little at Textron, Leon Hess at Hess Oil, or more recently, Bob McNair here in Houston. When it came to charity, he and Mom practiced impact investing long before it became a buzzword. Whether it was helping children learn to love and excel at tennis, first in Israel, and now with a similar project here in Houston, or helping the people in Morocco, elderly people, escape from a dangerous part of town into a much safer environment. His acts and their acts, my mother and he, changed people's lives. And it wasn't just charities. Dad was perhaps the most generous person I've ever met. He regularly gave money to friends and families in need, and always with no strings attached. It's an example Julie and I have tried to follow in our lives. Dad also had an amazing ability to poke fun at people in a way that was endearing and almost never taken personally. His pranks at college and afterwards, particularly with his fraternity brother, my late Uncle Alan, are part of family lore. Perhaps the best well-known are the, I would just say that my Uncle Alan was a very fastidious guy. Everything was in place, very well groomed, as much as anybody I've ever met. So it was Dad's pleasure to periodically in college put chocolates in his slippers. And then throughout most of his life, make paintings and things on his desk everywhere just a little bit askew just so he'd have to come in and fix them. It gave him tremendous delight, and Uncle Alan was a really good sport about it. He's done that with all of his best friends, and they all will, I'm sure, have stories about that. Last, I guess, let me just say one thing. That last thing, I did have one thing in there I didn't mention. It's a skill, his ability to do this with people and to basically be straight with them, be honest with them, even poke fun and potentially be critical with them. It's something I've never seen anybody else do as skillfully. So it's really something that I've tried to emulate with much less success. Anyway, last, my dad was kind of a Renaissance man. He excelled at many things: tennis, the trumpet, business, and charity. And he was able to enjoy all of them, and enjoy them he did. My father had fun and shared his fun with more people, all of you and all of his extended friends and family who I hope are streaming into this, and loved every minute of it. Besides that, he was the most naturally grateful person I've ever met, and truly loved his life. Together, this package of traits and attributes, his intelligence, his wit, his drive, and his caring, made him perhaps the most effective person I've ever met. I'll miss him forever. Thank you.
As you heard, Fred Levine was born in Kansas City, Missouri, spent his early life in Wichita. He was a man who loved his work, and as you heard, began his career early, his dynamic career at the age of 13, selling shoes and then playing in jazz bands on Saturday nights, making sure it was a 7-day-a-week work process. After all those early experiences, success followed Fred in every endeavor that he undertook. Fred met his beloved Velva at college at OU, driving past one of the campus frat houses with her brother Alan. Walking by was this tall, skinny guy. And Alan said to Velva, "That's Freddie Levine. He's a really nice guy." Sure enough, wedding took place right after college. And after a short stint in the Air Force, the young couple returned to Wichita to start a family and a professional career. Velva loved to tease Fred, calling him the most spoiled man in America. In Velva's words, Fred was an only child and was doted on as if he were a god. Fred refused to eat leftovers and certainly was not engaged in household chores. And it was only in the last few years that he learned to make coffee for himself. Until his last breath, Fred deeply adored Velva. Making her feel good was one of his great delights in life. On each plane flight, they would hold hands as they took off and then again as they landed. And later in life, when Fred would come home to take afternoon naps, nothing gave him greater joy than just having Velva at his side. And each evening, together, they would recite the Shema, an honor that Rabbi Teller and I shared with them together just a week ago. Fred treasured doing business with his son, Bob. Bob, like so many young people, left for college determined not to go into business with his dad. And so law school it was, and an early career in law. A few years later, just before Yom Kippur, Bob and his wife Julie went to lunch with Fred and Velva. And during that lunch, Bob announced, "I want to quit law and return to school to earn an MBA." Fred was overjoyed, and the two couples spent the balance of the afternoon celebrating, talking, and imbibing more than just a few. The outcome the next day was a Yom Kippur afternoon in bed with headaches. After completing his MBA and starting a partnership in a private equity firm, Bob would discuss every transaction with Fred, who provided him with a lifetime of experience, father and son enjoying each moment together. And ultimately opening up his own firm, Bob called it L2, for Levine's second generation, as a way of honoring his dad. Fred loved to please others, seeing the joy on their faces. And over the years, anticipating her smile, Fred would bring Dana numerous dolls from wherever he went. Dozens of dazzling dolls for which he had display cases built so Dana could show off her prize collection. And as you know, Fred was also a man who liked to have a little fun and to challenge himself. He loved to play tennis and was a ranked player, winning several Israeli tournaments. And Fred was a total ham who embraced the spotlight. Being around others, sharing good times, performing were sources of great joy for him. Bob attributed, as you heard, much of Fred's success in life to his father's special skill of creating an environment in which others simply loved to be with him. And he possessed that rare gift, the gift of being able to offer criticism in ways in which others would not take it personally. His words would not come across as judgmental. Fred yearned for the opportunity to make a good deal, and he didn't feel in any way restrained by the rules of PC. He purchased many knockoff watches, which he referred to, among other things, as Polexes. When he would travel to other towns, the street vendors knew he was coming, and they'd rush to bring their knockoffs to his hotel. And he loved negotiating at flea markets around the world, in Morocco, in Turkey, and in Israel. Velva would decide what she liked, and Fred would go into action, the master of negotiating. Fred loved good clothes and dressing well, a trait attributable to his mom. Until this most recent home that they've got together. Wherever Fred and Velva set up a home, his closet was twice the size of hers. And obviously, Fred cherished playing the trumpet, an endearing memory for many of us who observed as he marched down the aisle for his 90th birthday party, adorned in a crown, blasting out, "Here come the saints." Many working hours resulted in Fred taking family time very seriously. A sports enthusiast, he decided that the kids would become involved in water sports. He bought a boat, and following summers of family fun, Bob and Dana became expert water skiers. For those summers, Fred arranged the construction of an A-frame prefab home with a bunk room in which all of the family kids would come and stay, furthering this powerful sense of family. And that home became a magnet for family and a destination resort. Liking toys and falling in love with boats, Fred acquired a series of cigarette racing boats, each one bigger and faster than its predecessor. And the family joked that after the purchase of his last boat, the only people with faster boats were the feds and the criminals. Hans Maurer spoke of his son's wedding 20 plus years ago, an event to which a free-spirited Fred had his beloved boat shipped 1,500 miles to Florida, and then took the immediate wedding party on a ride onto the bay for a glorious and unforgettable experience beneath a golden sky. When it comes to philanthropic hearts, it's challenging to determine where one even begins with both Fred and Velva. Being enduringly passionate about Israel, it was Fred's idea to underwrite the Federation's connection missions, believing in the resounding importance of people visiting the Holy Land. Fred and Velva established education programs in the Negev and the tennis centers that you heard about, as well as the one that they're building here in town. Elsewhere, internationally, Fred and Velva facilitated the building of a home in Morocco for the aged to allow the seniors to be in a much safer environment. Just having witnessed where they were and fearing for them, what's the natural response for a Fred Levine? In the Texas community, the Levine influence is profound. After years of generous contributions and support, they have recently provided the lead gift for the new Federation building, endowing an incredible chaplaincy program and sponsoring Shabbat boxes are among the many ways in which Fred and Velva have impacted Jewish family services. As I mentioned, they're currently sponsoring the establishment of a tennis center at the ERJCC. The Holocaust Center, Hillel, AJC have all grown and benefited from their passion. Their support of Camp Young Judea is clear through the building of a camper cabin, a basketball court, and a retreat village room. In that experience is shared with everybody every summer and now year-round as well. Emory Weiner Day School boasts of an innovation lab due to the foresight and the generosity of the Levines. And here at Brit Shalom, Fred and Velva have been among the flag bearers. They're the flag bearers for support assuring a vibrant and dynamic synagogue. And we at the synagogue have had the same experience as all of the other institutions. Fred and Velva see a need, they call, and they offer to fix without being asked. With hugs and with warmth, they have always extended a hand and asked, how can we help? Comments throughout the community upon hearing of Fred's passing consistently reflect the nature of this remarkable man. Hardworking and successful. He was a mensch, a wonderful and kind man. Simple goodness through and through. He was whom you aspired to be as you get older. In the words of Frank Silberlicht, he made our world greater, our Houston community stronger, and Camp Young Judea better. Federation noted Fred's passion and his sense of pride and responsibility together with Velva for the Jewish community as a whole. One of Fred's greatest joys was blowing shofar right here on this bima. He would proudly tell anyone who would listen, he was the Baal Tekiah. And each year the congregation would hold its breath to see how long Fred could hold that final Tekiah Gedolah, an act he practiced for months in advance. And it was a recording of his shofar blowing that we used to complete Yom Kippur, each of the last two COVID-plagued high holidays. Fred described blowing the shofar as a source of his Jewish identity and his Jewish pride. Harold Frederick Levine had a life well lived. He was a proud family man, an accomplished businessman, a philanthropist, a tennis player, a musician. He was a pillar of the community, a man who laid foundations both figuratively and literally, and who together with his Besheret Velva assured a bright and powerful Houston Jewish community and a better world for years to come. He was a loving husband of 67 years to Velva, a dedicated dad to Bob and Dana, and a treasure to so many people in countless ways. He will be dearly missed. May he rest in peace, and may his name be remembered for a blessing.
Friends, in just a moment, we'll recite the El Maleh prayer. Earlier today, we laid Fred's body down to rest, but his soul survives. And as you've heard from his children, from Ken and Levine, that soul is a powerful soul. And at moments like these, we can break through the wall and experience his soul as we recite the El Maleh.
מלא רחמים, שוכן במרבנים, המצוי בנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע, את נשמת לעולמו בגן עדן תהי מנוחתו, בעל הרחמים, אז תראהו בסתר כנפך לעולמו, וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו, אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר אמן.
Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure to the soul of Fred Levine, who has gone to his eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. May he rest in peace, and together we say Amen. We recite the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divra kirute v'yamlich machute, v'chaye echon v'yom echon v'chaye dechol beit Yisrael, v'hagala u'bizman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah Mevorach Leolam Olamei Omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudesha brichu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Ose shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen. May the one who makes peace above bring peace and comfort to us below. And together we say, Amen. Amen. You may be seated. Friends, when we conclude our recessional here, we'll make our way to the bagel shop catering hall called the New York Eatery, which is right here on Bel Air and Chimney Rock. The address is 5422 Bel Air Boulevard. And tomorrow evening, we'll have a Shiva on Zoom that we're going to connect with friends and family here in Houston and all across the globe at 6 p.m. Friends, we'll conclude with a joyful music that Fred enjoyed during his lifetime, and that will always remind us of Fred and his joyful music. Please allow the trumpeter and the family to recess, and then we'll follow.